All right, not the most conventional of settings here. Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. I'm sitting in my car. You know that commercial that has that funny thing about the jewelry at the airport and the kiosk? It's like literally right behind me. I'm sitting in the parking lot here of that, Matt.
Well, a really great podcast doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, apparently.
No, there you go. I love that. Yeah, and there's a glare here coming in, so I have my sunglasses. I'm trying to look like the Terminator here on the podcast today.
You look like you just pulled me over. That's what you look
Is
like.
that what it looks like? There you go.
Yeah,
It
it
looks like.
looks like you just pulled me over.
Well, I did just pull over, but you know what? We had to because we had to get you everybody an episode here of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. But anyway, if you're just watching, you're listening, my apologies. It doesn't look maybe or sound like as normal, but you got Matt there, and he should as well. The reason why we wanted to do this is because a lot's going on with the Bills, and I just came back from practice today, Matt. I'm on my way back from practice, and another good sign. Mike Edwards returned. Cole Bishop returned yesterday, and DeMar Hamlin actually did quite a bit on the side today, considering it was a hamstring injury. You know, him doing like a lot of footwork was a good sign. So, are they getting a little health? They are getting a little bit healthier at safety? What does it all mean, and how much confidence does it inspire in you?
Well, it still makes me want to see the Bills sign Micah Hyde because I have to talk about that every episode of the podcast. But they are much healthier now than they were even just a couple days ago at the position. Now that Cole Bishop is back in some capacity, Mike Edwards is back, and then of course DeMar Hamlin. It feels like his timeline has sped up a little bit because when he was first considered week to week, that was a bit of a surprise given the fact that we had seen him out on the field doing work literally last week and even in that Pittsburgh joint practice. So that was a bit of a surprise, but now I know Cole Bishop is still in a red non-contact jersey. It feels like, though, he is taking steps in the right direction. In Mike Edwards, they just threw him right back into kind of the fire because he was out there and he wasn't in a non-contact jersey, which to me says that he's, not like right around the corner from being back, but pretty close.
Yeah, for sure. And as much as the injury report is lengthy, I think at least you're going to get a few other people that might have a chance too when it comes to week one. The Bills, this happens every year. Happens every year. Now there may be more injuries this year than normal. I get that, or what we're used to. But every year I remind myself and I remind people and fans, there's always going to be injuries kind of towards the end of preseason. Then they kind of back off and they take it slower to get everyone healthy so they can be as healthy as they can be headed into week one. It appears as though that's at least trending that way with the safety position. The question is going to be how quickly they can get Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop up to speed, especially a guy like Cole Bishop, who's a rookie. He's never played in the NFL before. I mean, that's going to be the trick. And even if they're healthy enough to play, I wonder if, how much and what that role is for either of them.
Well, I wonder if this is something we talked about a couple podcasts ago after the Matt Milano injury. I wonder if they're trying to get Cole Bishop ready to be the guy who plays in dime situations, and Mike Edwards can be the other safety along with Taylor Rapp. And Cole Bishop, they can use a little bit more sparingly as long as those other two guys are healthy. I feel like it would be a pretty big undertaking for Cole Bishop to come back from an injury and win a potential starting job and just be out on the field as a full-time starter week one against the Cardinals. I still think the front runner for that is going to be Edwards. And then after that, it's just try and utilize Cole Bishop wherever you think you can. Maybe that's in special teams. Maybe that's when they go to dime. Maybe it's just to do some creative things on defense. So that's kind of the way I'm envisioning it plays out in my head. But I do think the best case scenario for the Bills would be if Cole Bishop just wins the job. He's the one who they've invested the most in from just a draft capital standpoint. Mike Edwards is a shorter deal. Taylor Rapp is a medium deal, but really they can get out of it after 1 year. Like Cole Bishop is the guy that they've invested in with the future. So the best case thing that would happen would be that he's just awesome and that he plays and makes a difference.
The Bills have 2 games in 5 days to start the season. They have to think about that. Not only 2 games in 5 days, the second game is a divisional game at Miami. So if anybody's borderline, you might have to hold them back. So that's what makes this a little bit trickier as well. And then we get to the same situation at wide receiver. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he's still out with the neck injury. Curtis Samuel still out with turf toe. Neither of them practiced at all on either Tuesday or Wednesday this week. At what point do you get really concerned about that group?
I'm already almost there. Not really concerned, but turf toe is one of those ones that lingers.
Yeah.
So with Curtis Samuel, I know a lot of the median recovery time for turf toe is around a month. And if the injury happens last week, then that kind of puts him right up to the start of the season. He could be one, well, maybe we're not going to put you out there for week one, but we'll hope you'll be available week two. It's just they're already so scarce at that position. I would be really concerned for the Bills even against the Cardinals, if they only had Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins, and Keon Coleman available. Doesn't feel like there's enough juice with that wide receiver group, regardless of who the opponent is. MVS wouldn't be as concerned without him just because it has been such a unimpressive summer, really. But Curtis Samuel is somebody who I think is going to have a really big role in this offense. So if he's not available soon, then I will be pretty concerned.
Yeah, and I agree about Curtis Samuel. To me, it's always been the more concerning issue, wide receiver than safety. At least not always. I should say the last week or so since these injuries started popping up because of I think that you're going to get some of the guys back, but just simply what you have behind them. And I just think that the system and the coaching can kind of insulate the safeties. Yeah, you might give up a couple big plays, and I understand that, and that's not something you want to see. But I just don't know how you can sustain any offensive output if you don't have Curtis Samuel out there, and if MVS is going to be a contributor on this team. Curtis Samuel is such a big player on this team. The drop off, I think, to know if would Khalil Shakir become your number one? Would Keon Coleman become your number one? He does so much for this offense. That's why the concern level for me at wide receiver is more than safety. I'm not quite there yet because I think that they're playing this pretty slow. We'll see where it goes. I do want to touch on a couple other injuries. Number one, I'm going to get to backup quarterback in a minute. Linebacker. Again on Tuesday and Wednesday. So Nicholas Morrow came back and is doing individual. He has not done team reps. Balen Spector is still out, man.
Yeah.
Is Balen Spector, in your mind, how close is he to becoming maybe a candidate to IR so they can keep Joe Andreessen?
I think that that's what's going to happen. I do. And I think that since we recorded the last podcast, maybe I was sleeping a little bit on the Joe Andreessen hype of really impressive story. And I always thought that. But the dude played. And I mean, when you're having people out there breaking down your tape on social media, Brian Baldinger and Sports Illustrated and like big time people, I don't think you can as easily sneak somebody like that onto a practice squad. I think that I legitimately, I know what they think about Balen Spector, but even if they didn't want to just put him on IR, I think that they could cut him and then get him back to their practice squad. It's been several years, and he's had multiple opportunities to carve out a bigger path on the team, and the injuries have kind of always been a thing. So that's why I think there's a real chance Joe Andreessen makes the roster, one, because of how he's performed, and he deserves credit for that, but two, just because of all the injuries at that position. Linebacker has been very banged up.
I'll say it this way. I think you agree. I think this is exactly what you're saying as well. Joe Andreessen's going to be on a 53-man roster to start the season. The question is if it's the Buffalo Bills or not. Because if he's waived by the Bills, someone else is claiming him. I just don't see him going unclaimed by all 31 other teams.
What a story, huh? If that ends up hacked, I would have never in a million years thought that when they signed Joe Andreessen. That's cool, good opportunity for a local guy, not you think that this guy can make the 53-man roster. I do, in a way, think that it's a little bit of it paints a little bit of a scary picture for the Bills at linebacker if that is a guy who has won a job. I know he played great, but it feels like now a position that you're only a couple injuries away from having some real questions. I think that he did a really, really commendable job in his second preseason game. I want to see how he does in the preseason finale because he'll certainly play a lot. But I also do want to pump the brakes on the hype a little bit of understanding he's a very instinctual player. Instincts can get you by in a preseason game when there isn't as much game planning, more than it can in the regular season when teams are planning on how to attack you and game planning specific things that they're trying to do.
Yeah, Bobby Babbage said to us when we were down there on Wednesday, I asked him about injuries and specifically kind of start off because I know you've been asked a lot, but this has been the story this week. And it was really interesting. I really like his answer. He said, look, he had a great game, obviously, right? But it's one game. And the true mark of a professional to be a pro in this league is to be consistent, to do it week after week. So he'll have another shot to do that. And Bobby's not discounting or saying he's going to or not. He's just saying you got to back it up and you got to keep doing it. And those are the things day to day, week to week. Those are the things you're going to be looking for in Joe Andreessen. I agree. I mean, would you agree that maybe nobody on the team has more riding on Saturday's game than Joe Andreessen?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, that's probably the right answer. I think you could also get to a guy like a Daquan Hardy. I think Daquan Hardy has taken a step towards winning the kick return job and the punt return job, but I don't think he's won it yet. So I think if he had a really disastrous game on Saturday, maybe they would go find a veteran The only thing with Daquan Hardy is I like what he's done on defense as well.
Yep.
So that's why it's like, well, you know who else is a big game for? Just another bubble guy, Kingsley Jonathan. Like Javon Solomon is making the team. So Kingsley Jonathan, I think, is a really good game away from potentially earning the final spot on the defensive line. Or they have to figure out, would they rather have a Casey Toohill? Would they rather have somebody who's got a little bit more NFL experience? Because I think like Von Miller's on the team, Greg Rousseau's on the team, AJ Epinesa is on the team, Smoot is on the team, and Javon Solomon is on the team. At most, you're keeping one more pass rusher, and I think that it's kind of between Jonathan and Toohill.
What about Tyrell Shavers? Is this like a make or break? Is he?
No, I don't think it is because of the injuries.
I
I
think
think
he's on the
because
team, right?
I think because of the injuries, he is firmly on the team. What I'm anticipating happens, there's no insider information here. This is just completely a hunch, is that Curtis Samuel is on the 53-man roster and they put MVS on IR and just know that they're not going to have him for the first 4 games and they keep Shavers. That's just a complete guess.
Yeah, it would make sense. Then you can at least evaluate Shavers while you work through it as well, right? I mean, like, and you don't want to use the games as evaluation, but it's a chance for him to play a little bit. I'm trying to think. It's a good question here that we're going through here. We're doing the, who's this big game for? There was another person. Oh, how about Zach Davidson?
Yeah, that's a good one. To me, that all comes down to Quentin Morris's injury.
Yeah,
Is Quentin
sure.
Morris injury something that is risking him from being available for the season? Because if it is, then I think Zach Davidson has a real chance of making it. But if Quentin Morris is going to be ready, I don't know what he could do in this game that would win him a job.
What do you think happens between now and Tuesday at backup quarterback? And let me say, Tuesday, we saw Mr. Trubisky walking out and he was very noticeable limp. Okay. Wednesday, also noticeable limp, but one change. He was wearing a brace Wednesday. He wasn't wearing a brace on Tuesday. It just doesn't look good. I mean, Tuesday is cut down day. They have 18 days from the time we record this before the first regular season game. I just really wonder how this plays out.
I think that if Trubisky is going to be sidelined for more than a month, they will go out and find a backup quarterback. If Trubisky is right on the fringe of, well, he might be ready week 1, he might be ready week 2, I think they just roll the dice and maybe they just put him on their 53-man roster and they have like Ben DiNucci on their practice squad and then they just activate him for game days and he's their backup. What I think the really likely scenarios are, do the Steelers keep 3 quarterbacks? And if they do, is that Kyle Allen? And if Kyle Allen isn't kept, do they bring him back? Do they make a call to Matt Barkley just to try and have him? But if they were going to make that call, I feel like they would have already done it. You know what I mean? Like, why would they bring in Anthony Brown before they would bring in Matt Barkley? That just doesn't make sense to me. Even if it's just for, hey, go play the 3rd and 4th quarter of this last preseason game. Here's a couple $1,000 because we really appreciate all you've done for the organization. So Kyle Allen is an interesting name to watch. I just don't see them investing a big amount of money or a resource in getting a backup quarterback unless Trubisky is like really injured.
Yeah. Does the play of Trubisky factor in for you? For me, it kind of doesn't, and I know he hasn't played well. I just think back to last year's preseason. Kyle Allen did not play well, and they didn't move on from him. Like, there was a lot of talk about should Kyle Allen be on the roster or not. And they're like, yeah, well, he's going to be our roster. He's the backup quarterback. We invested in him here. I feel they feel that way about Trubisky. The only reason that he might not be on the week 1 active roster would be because of injury, not because of play.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that this is more because of injury. They're going to have to get creative, though, just because there's so many different moving parts, right? They're going to have to figure out who are we willing to put on IR and knowing that we're going to miss them for the first month of the season. That's a big gamble with a quarterback. I don't think they're going to do that unless it really – what if Trubisky is hurt and it's a 2-month injury? What do? You put him on IR?
Then you have to put him on – I don't think you can – I think then you put him on IR and he becomes – maybe it's like one of those 2 spots. What's going to happen on Tuesday, so people know the mechanics of this, it changed this year. If you once Tuesday comes, by Tuesday at 4:00, you have to used to be you had to make the roster. Everybody had to make the roster, cut down to 53. Then you can IR guys, and they could be out 4 weeks. Now you get two guys you can literally put on IR on that final day, and they won't count. They won't have to make the roster. I think he's a candidate for that, and I think Bale Spector is too. To me, Trubisky and Spector, but you have MVS too as also a candidate. But if you have a 2 month injury for Trubisky, to me, you put him on IR at cut down day, and then you can bring him back when he's ready. It doesn't have to be for them. DiNucci becomes your number two. It's not ideal, but that's what you have to have.
Yeah. What a disaster that would be, though, if something happened and
Wow.
then you needed to play Ben DiNucci. And
Yeah.
it would be a disaster, probably regardless of who is behind Josh Allen. But man, would you not feel comfortable with him? You wouldn't feel comfortable with anybody that they have currently. That includes Mitch Trubisky, to be honest. None of the guys behind Josh Allen. The sample is so small for Ben DiNucci, so it's unfair. We haven't even seen Anthony Brown in a game yet. I'm just assuming that it's not going to be pretty. It's
Right.
just like, whoa, there's always a drop off from Josh Allen because I think he's one of the best players in the league. But boy, is there a drop off after their starting quarterback to the rest of the guys in that room this year.
All right, so let's wrap up a little bit by just kind of touching on Saturday and what we're expecting, what we're looking at, because it's going to be a day where we know the starters aren't playing. I read Dave Canales, the head coach of the Panthers, say he's open to playing starters, but he wouldn't commit. It sounded to me like he's basically saying, "Have a few good days of practice, and I'll not play you guys." We didn't want to say that to him, that kind of thing. We may just see a whole bunch of backups, and if that's the case, we may see a whole bunch of handoffs. And if that's the case, we're talking about a 2.5 hour game.
Heck yes. Heck yes. That's exactly what I want, right? Just hand the
Yep.
ball off a million times. I'm sure there's guys who don't want that. Tyrell Shavers wants to have some plays to firm himself onto the roster. Zach Davidson wants to have some attempts so he could give himself an outside chance. But yeah, I mean, it feels like it's a big. Let me ask you this, because this kind of plays into the handoffs thing. Have the Bills' three running backs are very clearly going to be James Cook, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson. Do they keep, does Frank Gore Jr. automatically go in their practice squad? Do you think so? Do you think he's done enough to win a practice squad job?
I do. I think you always have to have that extra guy. They like to have that extra running back in case something happens to one of the guys in their active rosters. He's been here since the beginning. And I
More
just
than
think,
Evans. More than Evans. You think he's been the more impressive or has the higher ceiling?
yeah, he's younger too. He's young. He's Darrington Evans been around. You could have them both. It might not be perfect with numbers. I also, honestly, I know not supposed to play politics here, but I think the relationship matters between, Frank Gore and his dad and the Bills. And the reason why Frank Gore's here, Frank Gore Jr., and not in San Francisco, where his dad works, by the way, for the Niners,
Yeah.
because Frank Gore Sr. said, "Go to Buffalo; they'll take care of you," basically, and he has that relationship. And I think Brandon Beane would kind of take care of him. Like, hey, we're going to groom this guy. We know what he can do. We know what his dad's all about. And I think that would matter.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, you can have the argument ethically if that's the right thing to do
Right?
or the wrong thing to do, considering Frank Gore spent 1 year of his career
Yes.
here. But if it's close, then yeah, I think you go with the person who's got the NFL pedigree. But more importantly, you go with the person who's got the bigger upside, which I think is him because he's a younger player and there's still a lot of improvement. And it's not like he has been a disaster. It's not like he doesn't belong. He's played in the preseason and has made some nice plays. So it's not like you're wasting a spot as a favor to somebody. It's oh yeah, this guy is pretty close. And if that conversation is they're both close, then maybe the tie goes to Frank Gore Jr. and they're, quote, taking care of him. I could also, though, see them just keeping two running backs on the practice squad and having both of those guys stick around.
Yeah, an underrated spot I'm going to be watching on Saturday is center.
Yeah.
I don't know. Alec Anderson's been working as the backup center, and I think they really like him there. But he's so flexible; they like him at guard and center. Sean McDermott said. So what do? You have Will Clapp, you have Cedric Van Pran Granger. I mean, can you keep all these guys because then you're thin at your tackle numbers, maybe? And I don't know how all this washes out, but that's an area I'm going to watch who's playing at what time.
I don't think Will Clapp's going to make the team. And I think
Okay.
that it has become a little bit more murky for him, given that he left practice on Tuesday with an injury, left with trainers. We don't know the severity of it or anything like that. But I just don't know if it's worth it to keep somebody when that would also mean then you have to probably keep somebody else off the roster. Like Van Pran Granger is making the team. Alec Anderson's obviously making the team. Ryan Vandermark's making the team. And then Lyle Collins is probably making the team. And just like that, you've got 9 guys, right? You probably got to just keep one more.
That's interesting. I had a discussion with another media member today who told me he doesn't think Lyle Collins is making the team.
Interesting. I would say that Collins is more valuable than Clapp. That's
And
just
the
my
reason
opinion.
why was because Tylan Grable's actually been playing
Mm-hmm.
outside as well and being used, and that could be maybe where you don't have La'el Collins, but even but the numbers would still be the numbers in your scenario here. Dion, Spencer Brown, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, David Edwards, Ryan Vandermark, Alec Anderson for sure.
Definitely.
Are you very positive Cedric Van Pran Granger?
I mean, I think so. I think so. And I think that
That's 8.
That's 8. And then after that, I would say
See, to me, you have
Collins.
after that, you have La'el Collins, Will Clapp, if you want to go 10, and Tylen Grable, which make 11. I don't think they're going to keep 11.
No, I think that it would be Collins, and that might just be I don't know. That's tough. I just don't see them cutting Van Pran Granger just because I know that there hasn't been like.
I think I agree with that because he's a center from a high level program. They made an investment on in the middle round draft.
Yeah.
Right? Draft pick.
I know Will Clapp has NFL experience, and I know that they like that for the backup guys, but I think they got to take guys with upside, and some of the other players have more upside.
All right, let's continue this discussion after we watch the team on Saturday. In the meantime, Matt's going to have full coverage at WKBW TV. I'll have it at WGR Sports Radio 550. Follow us on Twitter at Sal Sports, at Matt_Bove. And of course, if you're listening to me here while I'm in my car, vehicle, you can watch us on the YouTube page, Sal Sports. If you're watching there, you can just listen to the show wherever you pod. So, Matt, let's just we'll kind of go through what we think and maybe do our own little cuts and 53-man projection, next time we talk, which will be after the game.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Actually, we're literally planning our next podcast on our current episode of the podcast, which is nice. I'm putting together something on a 53 that I'll have on Saturday. So we will record something either Saturday or Sunday morning breaking down the game, but then also because it's a preseason game with a bunch of backups, that can only be like one segment of it. And then the rest of it, we can do 53-man roster projections. And then that'll kind of tide us over until the 53 is due, which I believe is next Tuesday, 4:00, correct?
Right. That is correct. Yes.
And then we should hear from Brandon Beane next week too. I would imagine that's a week from today, which is Wednesday. Yep. And then, yeah, it's interesting. We got to figure out how this is going to play out. Are we at the facility the day that they make their final cuts? We were last year.
I don't think so. We weren't last year. So
that was 2 years ago?
2 years ago. Yeah, maybe it doesn't appear as that's the case. I went back and looked, talked to some people in PR today. I don't know if that's what their plan is. I think we're looking more at the later in the week after cuts and hearing from Brandon Beane on Wednesday.
2 years ago, one of my favorite moments was 2 years ago on cut down day. Quentin Morris made the team, and it was a really cool story, but his name on his locker was spelled wrong.
Hey, I noticed it. I said, "Isn't your name spelled with an I?" He's like, "Yeah," because I'm not gonna. I'm not in a position to change anything or tell anyone.
Yeah, he was like, "Until I make the team, I wasn't going to say anything," and then he ended up making the team. Yeah, so I know that this is a really, really tough weekend for a lot of these guys.
Yeah,
but it's also an incredible weekend for some other guys who do get to fulfill their dream, which is really cool.
And we'll be all over it next time on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo.